If you have an attorney who says, well, I can't get that, it's not here, fire that attorney.
This week, we had Marilyn Chinitz on the show, and we had a great conversation about how to better your chances of receiving alimony. And we share some strategies to safeguard your own assets during divorce. I hope this episode is valuable to anyone who might be listening. Stay tuned for the full episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, Marilyn Chinitz is joining us. Marilyn is a partner at Blank Rome in New York City, specializing in complex and high-profile divorce cases. Today, Marilyn and I will be discussing how to handle and divide complex assets, tips for improving your chances of receiving alimony, and strategies to safeguard your own assets during divorce. Welcome to the show, Marilyn.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you. Lawyers tend to be my favorite guest. I'm a bit biased. It's a lot of fun, especially when you're in a different state and really just understanding how different things can be. It's wonderful for me, and I think our listeners love it as well.
Yeah. Well, the laws are different. And
Exactly.
That's what makes it challenging, especially when you have a client who has jurisdiction in different places.
And we have a lot of those at present, quite a bit. And I think, it used to be much more rare, we'd have some jurisdictional, but I think every single one of my 6 attorneys right now has a jurisdictional issue where we're figuring out, where the best state is, in which state, they're going to proceed on. So it's always fascinating to learn and understand how things work in a different state.
We're lucky at Blank Rome because we have 12 offices. So we have an office in LA, and I do have a lot of California cases so that I'm able to bring them in. And of course, New York is equitable distribution as Florida is, but California is not. It's community property. So very different.
Very
different. Important to have that intellect and that knowledge of the different states' laws.
Absolutely. Well, Marilyn, for our listeners, would you share a little bit about your journey to where you are now as a partner at Blank Rome?
Sure. So I had an interesting journey. My parents were not American, so I was not raised in an environment that they knew the best schools. But what I was raised was the philosophy that if you are a woman, and there are 3 daughters in my parents raised 3 daughters, you were going to be a professional no matter what. Could be a lawyer or a doctor, but you were going to be a professional. You were never going to rely on anyone. So I grew up with that very strong message. And I went to law school without sharing it with my parents. They thought I was a little wild when I was young. And my father one day came home and he shared with me that he sat next to a woman at a dinner party, and he was so impressed by her because she was an attorney, a corporate attorney, and he spoke so glowingly about her that I decided, you know what, I'd like that attention too. So I'm going to apply to law school, and I did. And I got into several law schools, and I chose a law school that I got a scholarship to. Again, when I say my parents were an American, it was a new school. And so it wasn't NYU where I went to undergraduate. It was a new school, and I decided I'm going to save my parents money. I got a scholarship. One sister was going to nursing school and another in medical school. So I went. And then I worked during law school, and I worked at a firm called Pryor Cashman, Sherman and Flynn. And as an intern, worked on a very interesting case, the first pay TV case in the U.S., and I knew that file intimately. And when they decided to move to another firm, Finley, Cumble, Wagner, Heine, Underberg, and Casey, it's in Malibu, they said, we want you to come with us. And I said, well, I'll go if you can get me a job there afterwards. And so I ended up going to that firm, and I ended up doing corporate litigation. And that's where I started. And then one of the partners quietly asked me to do his divorce, which I thought was fascinating. And we were able to settle his case. But I then said, I really would like to do matrimonial. Can I present to the partner board? And he said, you can, but they won't agree to it. they viewed it back then, and this was 40 years ago, as ambulancing. So,
Oh, okay.
I approached them, I gave them a business plan, they rejected it, and I decided to move on and to leave. And I then opened up my own practice, very gutsy in my 20s. I
Uh-huh.
took space with a colleague, and I had, worked out with him that I was gonna take his overflow, and he would give me office space for free. And I would work on his cases. And then Finley Humble became my big referral base. So my practice grew, and then I ended up going to Long Island to argue at a hearing, and an attorney came over to me and said, I want to work together. So we started a firm. We were 4 lawyers, and we grew to 18. And then almost 20 years ago, or maybe 18 years ago, I decided to go back to big law. And so I became a partner at Blank Rome, where I'd been for the past 18 years, and really built my practice to a very high net worth, interesting, dynamic practice. So that's my story in 5 seconds or less.
That is a great story. And I know there are even more sub stories within that for
Yes,
sure.
there
But
are. Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that. Now, when and you said you want to practice matrimonial law for our listeners, is there a difference between family law and matrimonial law?
It encompasses the same thing, which is custody, visitation, support, child support. But family law goes into more policy, and then other in areas, which is juvenile delinquency, child welfare. So there's a slight difference, but it's really under the same umbrella.
And I guess that's what you mean. You've said that on other podcasts, is where family law encompasses many different types of law. And
So that's why I like
is that
so
what you mean by that? Yep.
no. What I like
No.
about it, the different kinds of law is that if you are practicing matrimonial law, you need to be fluent in tax issues. You need to be fluent in trust and estate issues. You need to know how to look at an asset. And even though you're going to have forensic experts work with you, you need to know how to value those assets. So it brings together all these different areas. And that is what I find so fascinating about it. So it's not, we're not dividing up the brown glasses and China. We're talking about assets that are valued, in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and how to properly value those assets, and what is the calculation for dividing those assets. And so matrimonial, to me, encompasses all of that. And that's why I think it is one of the most fascinating areas of the law.
Well, I agree with you there. I have always loved, matrimonial law, family law. You get to help people so much, but the cases are fascinating. The facts and the intricacies of the other, other laws that come to play in it, and it's always interesting. I have found no case really is
So they're
hard to
all
read.
very different. They're all very fact
They
specific.
are. Mhm.
Emotions can be similar, but the facts can really be differentiated. And that's why if you look at cases and precedent, a lot of it is very fact specific, but it gives us the opportunity to see what's out there, how to differentiate our case, and make a stronger case.
Absolutely. Now, how does New York determine alimony?
So, in a lot of different ways, there's a lot of different factors. A court will look at duration of the marriage. That's really important. Are you married 2 years, or you're married 30 years? And there is a guideline for how the court will determine the durational aspect of support. Um, and of course, income is very important. Income from earnings. Do you receive income from trust distributions? Is a parent providing you with 200,000 a year worth of benefits, because the court can impute income to you? Um, are you receiving $20 million in a distribution because a court may say you don't really need support. Because if you take that 20 million and you park it in the bank and you earn right now 5.5%, and we look at what your expenses are, the court may find that support may not be appropriate in that case. But the court will look at generally, typically, 20% of the lower earning spouse's income. They subtract that from the higher earning spouse's income. They also consider what the child support is. The court doesn't want somebody to wake up and say, it's not worth it for me to go to work. I've got to pay this. I've got to pay this. So matrimonial court is a court of equity. So there are guidelines, but the court has wide discretion. And so those are all the factors that a court would look at: the duration, the income, whether or not you have income available to you, even though you're not working because of imputation, and whether or not the assets that you are receiving are so significant that you can generate very substantial income that will cover your expenses. So it's a wide variety of factors. One shoe doesn't fit everybody.
And that is for sure. Since this is women winning divorce, and we are talking about, we represent women only in their client, in their cases. How do you build a case for your female clients to receive alimony?
So, if a client has been married for a very long time, 30 years, raised a family, contributed very much to the other spouse's business, partnership, medical practice, whatever it is, you want to show the court that getting a distribution of assets should not be depleted for them to support themselves, because the other spouse is going to continue making money. And what you get in a distribution of assets should not be considered when you look at what a spouse needs for support. Give that spouse the recognition that they help create the other spouse's flow of income that they're not capturing. But you see, there's also things, and you want to tell a client how hard you want to work for them and what your arguments are going to be and your best arguments. But you also want to manage a client's expectations and explain how things are really done. So, for example, if you're married to a partner of a law firm and you're going to value the partnership interest, part of that valuation consideration is the income stream, because what you're getting is a portion of the income stream of that partnership. And so that has to be considered. So I always will manage a client's expectations and say, here's what we're going to ask for. Here's what their argument is going to be in response. Now let's look at how we're going to respond to that. So it's a juggle. It's not a, fight hard and you make your case. You've got to think of every permutation that's going to come out so that you can best defend against what the next argument is going to be. But, being out of the workforce for 30 years or 20 years and raising kids when you don't have a skill set, in my view, mandates that a support be awarded to the spouse, in addition to the distribution of assets. Give her exactly what the support was meant for, to get her back on her feet or him back on his feet. Because it's not always that the women are the non-money. They're very often, in my practice, very often the moneyed spouse. And I know you're going to want to ask about how do successful women view paying a stay-at-home dad support. Not well. They don't view it.
Yes, that has been my experience.
Yeah.
Yes, that women hate it even more.
Yeah.
Yes, than men. So how do you help your female clients? Because it's the opposite argument. So then you have to flip sides and then look at how do you prove that, say, their spouse doesn't need the alimony.
So it's very interesting because in all the cases that I had over the years, the husband before the divorce was successful.
Mhm.
Um, uh, the wife did not marry a loser. She married a man who made money. He could have been on Wall Street, he could have had a business, but he had a history of earnings. So that one differentiates very often what a woman's situation is, where she may not have a history of earnings. She may have not created a business. And then when the husband's business fails, or he was asked to leave a Wall Street job or a hedge fund, he still has a skill set.
Mhm.
And the court must consider that skill set. And that is a basis for him not to get support. Go out and get work. And very often these women who are high-powered, successful, high-earning individuals have a ton of help. They have nannies. They have housekeepers. So in fact, the other spouse is out playing tennis in the examples I'm going to give you, working out in the gym,
Mhm.
doing things that are not related to supporting the family. And that already is a distinction. So when you have a stay-at-home mom, I guarantee you in almost all the cases, she is the primary caretaker of the children. Even if she has a nanny, even if she has a housekeeper, she's boots on the ground. And I'm not denigrating men, but their mentality as I have seen it could be quite different.
Mhm.
So those are the two distinguishing factors that generally they've already had a history of earning and working, and they should return to that. They should not rely on their wives to, make the money, still take care of the children, and then have to pay you out.
Exactly. And, the statistics do show that even when the woman is the breadwinner or they're both working, women still do exponentially more of
Yes, they
the care
do.
of the children. Yeah, even when they are
I know it each in my
both
own
working.
experience, and I'm practicing 41 years. I have raised two fabulous kids. One is a lawyer, the other one is getting his MBA in business school. I worked nonstop. I
Mhm.
commuted nearly 3 hours a day. Saturday morning, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and my kids would see the dining room table filled with papers because from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., I got 4 hours of work done. And then I took them to soccer or to their activities, as my husband did. Um, but I always say, if you want to get something done, ask a busy woman, because we just organize it differently. So yes, I had help, but you're the parent with boots on the ground. And everybody knows to this day, even with adult kids and grandchildren, my kids call. I don't care if I'm in court or a meeting, everything stops. So I take that call.
Which is great, and it's a testament to you that you were able to do that and balance it, and I have seen that throughout the years as well, and it is certainly is possible, and women do they're just able to multitask and get it all done more so I think in my experience. Now, when when you're representing your clients in New York, I want to talk a little bit about mediation because in Florida, mediation is mandatory. It's
Yeah.
required in all family law cases, but I know it's not that way in all of the states. So how popular is that as a tool? Is it required in New York? How do you use that?
It's not required. It is becoming more popular. The courts are providing alternative dispute resolution parts with very qualified mediators, former judges. I think it is tremendously helpful. And the reality is, I prefer to settle cases for a whole host of reasons. But people have a lot of anger and a lot of issues. They'll ultimately end up settling close to where it was recommended initially, but they have to exhaust out their emotional um, anger issues to get to a place to resolve. That's unfortunate because we do have the ability to utilize not only mediation, but a lot of retired judges. In New York County, for example, we have several retired judges who are now doing arbitration and mediation. And I find them enormously helpful. And when we have a delta on a settlement, you know, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, my first thought is let's go to mediation, see if we can close it. You have nothing to lose. And if you have nothing to lose, why not try it? So I think mediation, especially after COVID, the court system has slowed down. The judges are overwhelmed, and we're not getting decisions out as quickly as we should. And I'm not
Right.
the judges, there's so much that they can do. But when the system is tired and you have alternate ways to resolve your matter, take advantage of it. And I think it's not mandatory, but it's definitely encouraged for good reason.
Yeah, I agree. And, also what you said, the emotions of divorce. And I think that, for certainly more experienced practitioners, they understand that with their clients. And it's like the case needs to be right. You need to be at that right time because the first day you come in, you're not ready to compromise. You've got to go through part of
You
that
are so
process
right. Timing.
and timing. And I, when I was much younger, less experienced lawyer, and there was a very experienced lawyer on the other side, and he really wanted to go to mediation very quickly. And we did. He's a very good colleague and respected. But I realized after that that the case just wasn't ready. The parties were not ready. And we ended up having to go to a second mediation and we did resolve. But I learned then, like, you really have to read where your clients are, of course, in addition to the attorneys being prepared with all of the financials and discovery.
But that's critically important. And
Yeah,
right on the nose. You can't do it prematurely. You've
right.
got to do your discovery. You got to do your due diligence. You have to collect your information. You need your valuations because if you're going
Hmm.
to argue, you're going to argue from a place of knowledge and fact and evidence, right? And
Hmm.
so that's what makes a lawyer a strong lawyer and a good person to mediate your case because you're armed with the evidence, you're armed with the facts. And so when you come into mediation, you know what your leverage is, and the other side sees that leverage, and that's what encourages people to settle. But you can't say, "Okay, let's go to mediation, we'll try." If it's
Right.
premature, it's not gonna work. Most cases that as we know, they settle on the court steps right before trial.
Yes. Right
Why?
before trial.
Because you've got all your information. You know your exposures. Are you really gonna take that gamble?
Hmm.
And wiser heads generally prevail. And sometimes you have to go through that cycle to get to that point. But I think good mediators will tell you, get your facts, get your information. And then give me a memo with all of it backed up. And then a good mediator is going to sit down, and I know these former judges, they really look at the papers, they look at the memos, they look at the experts' reports, um, and so that you have a fruitful mediation, not arbitration, because that's binding, and that's different than mediation.
And why
So
don't we talk a little bit about that for our listeners? Because here in Florida, we don't do that. That is not a common practice in a family law case. Certainly
yeah,
in civil, and there's a lot of other areas. But for our listeners, if you can help them explain, if you just explain the difference, because I know
sure.
they don't know, and it's
So
important.
if you decide that you want to have your case arbitrated with a judge or a retired judge to arbitrate, the decision that the judge makes is final. You cannot appeal it. And so, from my perspective, I always want my clients to know that if something was overlooked or a judge didn't favor them, they have the
Mhm.
right to appeal. And
Mhm.
so there's a process in New York that you can ask the mediator, and parties agree that the mediator will hear and report to the judge. And then
Mhm.
the judge will review the findings made by the mediator, but it will be the judge making the decision. And if you don't like that decision, a litigant can appeal it. If you have an arbitration, you are you're signing a retention that whatever the arbitrator determines is final and binding, and you do not have the right to appeal. And I think that's what you have to present to your client. I prefer mediation, hear and report with a judge
Mhm.
stamping, or just mediation. And if
Right.
it doesn't work out, we have the option to trial.
Mhm.
So that's a
Mhm.
very important consideration because people really don't understand what the difference is, and it's a very significant difference.
Is there, and I'm just interested, are there circumstances where, arbitration does make sense and you do that in a
Sure.
divorce, even though there's no
I
right to
yes,
appeal?
you can. If you feel like you have a rock solid case and you are so done with the litigation process and you're done and you don't want an appeal, and then you don't want an appeal from that appeal going up to the Court of Appeals, I'm finished. I'm not paying anything. I feel like I have a good case. I want to arbitrate. I want to be done.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, do you find that cases with complex assets settle faster, um, or stay out of the courtroom maybe more than, folks with just, your average?
It's not complex assets. It's when people have a lot of money, do those cases settle sooner rather than later?
Hmm.
Because if it's complex assets, if you're going to advise your client, you want to make sure that those assets have been properly valued, looked at. So the complexity is not the issue because it's mandatory that you evaluate each of those assets, no matter how complex, and you retain expert forensics, accountants, and so forth, and and those who do valuations. It's when you have a lot of money. So if I said in a high net worth case, look, the marital pot is $1 billion, and I'm using a very extreme number. Most people don't have that. But I'm just giving you an example. And I'm going to offer you, my spouse, 20%, 200 million, tax free up front.
Hmm.
Are you going to bang on the desk? No, I want 500 million. You know, because you have to make a decision what's best for your life. Can I live?
Right.
Am I going to
Hmm.
be very happy? I'm probably not even going to spend that money during my lifetime. Or do I want to fight to the bitter end
Hmm.
and get every single penny that under the law I may be entitled to, but it's going to take me 8 to 10 years to find that out?
Wow.
My personal view in life, and I'm
Hmm.
68 years old, life is too precious. Every day is
Hmm.
less. And how many times have we seen clients who've gone through long years of very stressful litigation? And in the end, unfortunately, several end up getting sick with cancer because stress is a horrible thing. And so you have to evaluate what is good in your life, what is right for you. I have clients who will say, Marilyn, I want to get done. I don't want to fight to the bitter end. I want to travel. I want to enjoy my children. I can live with this amount of money very well. I'm fine. Let's close it out.
Hmm.
And then there are others who are so angry that they will litigate it. So it's not the complexity
Yeah.
of the asset. It's when there's a lot of money. You
Mhm.
can get a very fair settlement, but you have to determine, do you want to fight to the bitter end to get what you may think you're entitled to, 50%, or do you get a certain amount that you're really comfortable and you never have to worry about anything financially? And that's a personal choice that people make.
Yes, and I think that's, going to depend on where they are emotionally, like you said, and really from my standpoint, how much healing they've had done or doing versus, is if they're able to put it in perspective of their future and helping them, win at life, be successful versus hurting the other person. And I know we see that so often because that's a common, I think, emotion that people have in divorce that most times does fade. But, initially there can be such anger and such a desire to make them hurt as bad, as maybe.
And I think we as practitioners need to do everything we can for our clients to get past that.
Mhm.
Because anger and all of the things that come with it permeate throughout your life. It makes you a very unhappy person. It flows into how you relate to others, how you relate to your children. Decisions get distorted. You want to have a clear, healthy mind to make the right decisions. An angry mind really clouds your mind, in my view, and holds you back. So I really encourage part of the process of representing somebody is that they are healthy mentally. And
Right.
that's really important. And they should be around people that support that good mental health. Because it's a tool to have to make better decisions.
Absolutely. I've had so many guests on the podcast, and we talk about that because you have to be in the right frame of mind to evaluate an offer, but also in that frame of mind so you can actually hear your attorney. You can understand,
Correct. That's right.
what's at risk, the pros and cons, and make decisions, not from that fight or flight mechanism, but from a more rational standpoint of looking forward in your future and what's best for you. And I agree. I think that's a huge part of our practice is to work through that with clients so that they're in a space where they can hear that because sometimes it takes them longer to get there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Some folks do.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's and again, I think that's why practicing matrimonial is a big responsibility on many levels, and one that I've always welcomed for from day one.
Agreed. I see it as when practice matrimonial and family law and you do it well and you really care about people, you can make a huge difference in their life because you care more about just, finishing the divorce. You care about them as a person and how they're making those decisions.
I have a very unique practice because most of my clients stay close to me long after their divorce. That's unusual. And I have a very close relationship with former clients because you are very invested in their life. And in fact, you end up really liking, the other person. So I'm very blessed with that. I do a wonderful luncheon every year, 50, 60 women, present clients, former clients, and they all meet. They come at 12:30, they leave at 5:30. And it's really remarkable. And friendships come out of that, business relationships, and these are high-powered women.
Yeah.
But it's nice because if you've gone through a divorce and you are now at a really good place and you're going through a divorce, you have a lot to learn. You see that,
Yeah.
wow, I'm so amazed that that person went there. It's great incentive. And women do like to share,
Yeah.
um, and
Yes, they
help,
do.
and that's a wonderful thing.
That is awesome. Now, I have a question about, if you have maybe more unique assets, some things that are different than, just obviously accounts, real estate, and jewelry. Who do you call? How do you help figure out what everything is worth?
So, I believe in having a very strong team of experts work with me. And the first thing is a forensic accountant, because if you're looking at a business valuation, that requires a very in-depth qualitative and a quantitative analysis. And so you want people that do that day in, day out. And there are different ways that you can approach a business and how you're going to value that business. Um, and these are people that do it all the time. You can do it by way of a market approach, an income approach, and they do the analysis um, and a deep dive that when you're working with somebody who's concentrating just on that aspect, someone that you really rely on that's good, they come out with a report, and it's an expert report, and it's a report ultimately that I am going to rely on if I have to go to trial. But those valuations are critically important because there's a lot of different ways to value different assets. A law practice, a medical practice, a business, um, all have different methods of valuation, and so you want the best team. Yeah, I will also have an investigative team, and I don't mean investigative, a little Snoop Dogg watching where you're going. Um, there's a lot of information that lives in the servers and forensic analysis of certain transactions and whatnot. A good expert not only values the business, but they will do a lifestyle analysis. So if I say, well, the husband claims he's only earning $200,000 a year, but well, wait a minute, here's our expenses. We're spending 800,000. Here's the
Mhm.
lifestyle analysis. Well, then you have a lot of explaining to do. So, you want really good experts. And, very often I have trust and estate partners that work with me because then we try to figure out, first of all, if assets during the marriage have been transferred to the trusts that were set up. I want to make sure that those trusts were not set up on the heels of a divorce. If they were set up
Mhm.
decades ago, then that shows proper estate and tax planning. If they were set up a year prior to the divorce, then red flags go up. So you have to be very meticulous about every single detail in analyzing a case. You've got to look at the assets and you need to understand how they get valued, who are the best experts. And if you don't like the expert's report and you feel like there's a lot of holes in there and something doesn't look right, and that can happen, then you get a peer review. You can retain another expert to kind of look over the shoulders and do a peer review. And that
Mhm.
also is very helpful. Um, so I think we don't stand alone. We stand together with other experts to give the client the best information, advice, and service.
And, kind of talking a little bit about the unique types of assets, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, can be tough to maybe track and maybe harder to divide in a divorce. What challenges have you seen when it comes to dealing with digital assets? And I know there's a lot of NFTs and we could
Yeah,
go
but
on
they're
and
more
on, but
complicated. They are more complicated,
yeah,
and you can spend a boatload of money trying to trace it. Uh,
right.
and then there are other aspects, because it is a very different type of asset, not always easily ascertainable. But
Hmm.
if you see again that there are big holes, gaping holes, and question marks, you may say, I want the remaining marital assets, or I want 60%, and I'm willing to forego certain things. But you can't do that until you get to really understand the approximate value of some of those assets. And look, cryptocurrency and other digital assets are fairly new, but you
Right.
can absolutely value as long as you can locate the asset. Um, and again, there are experts that we work with that really know how to crack that open so that we can get the information, value the asset, and consider it when we distribute assets.
And do you have and I know you do because you've told us you have an amazing team. But just for our listeners, how do you approach cases when you have international asset, whether it's property in other countries or bank accounts and, really addressing that when you're in New York doing the divorce? How do you
Sure.
handle
So I've
that?
I've faced lots of issues, not only international asset location, but international custody cases. But we'll stick with the financial. So it's no different. If you have a client whose spouse has significant assets in France or Sweden or wherever, you retain local counsel there and you line up and you get information, boots on the ground. So we can't access their real estate records, but the attorney who we retain there will. And so we also have the ability to hire investigators who look into assets that are offshore. And that has a negative connotation. Just because you
Mhm.
have money in another country doesn't mean it's an offshore undisclosed account, right?
Right. Doesn't mean it's
Um,
hidden
it
necessarily.
doesn't
It's
mean that
just,
it's hidden.
yeah.
But but if you have the right professionals, the right attorneys, the right experts in that location, you're going to get all the information that you can. I have a client whose husband lives in Israel, barely made any disclosures, but we've gotten a whole host of all the information. It's
Mhm.
readily available. We hired a great attorney in Israel. I have a case in Italy, the same thing. We went and we found properties that were inherited, then sold. And so we got the whole line of what the history of that property was. Information in 2024 is readily available.
This
And
is
so if
true.
you have an attorney who says, well, I can't get that, it's not here, fire that attorney and get somebody who has the resources, knows how to
Mhm.
use their head, and can access all the good information that's out there. And it's out there.
And that is true. The information is out there. There's so much access to people elsewhere that can help you.
Sure.
Now, what are some of your most memorable wins or cases to the extent that you can talk about? Because those are always fun to hear about.
So I just had dinner with some colleagues and we were talking just about that. I had two that really stand out that I spoke about the other night. One is I uncovered a murder in 2009. And that was quite a
Mm.
fascinating case. It was a woman who was found dead by her then 9-year-old daughter, December 31, 2009. I had never met her. She was apparently in the middle of a divorce case. She had an order of protection. The order of protection was dropped. Husband lived across the hall. Um, and make a very long story short, the police thought that she had fallen, hit her head in the bathtub, and died. Her family came to me. They were Orthodox Jews and they would not do an autopsy. She was buried immediately. And she was also cleaned up. So her fingernails were scrubbed, her body was scrubbed before burial, and she was buried. In any event, they told me that they wanted to see her children, that the husband, father was not permitting that. And what can I do to bring a case so that they can see their sister's children? And I spent a lot of time with them and I asked them, tell me about the divorce, tell me what happened.
Mhm.
They said, the history, he was abusive, he was this, he was younger. And after several hours of spending time with them, I said, you buried your sister. I think you buried the evidence. I think he killed her. And
Mhm.
if you want to retain me, it's not going to be just to get access to the kids. It may be to get custody of the kids, but I want to hire private investigators. And again, long story short, I hired private investigators. They got incredibly circumstantial evidence that just blew everybody away. Geraldine Ferrara was my partner.
Oh,
And
wow.
she was so amazing. And I had multiple conversations with her and told her about this case. And I said, I'm going to make an application to exhume the body. She said, don't do that because they're going to go to the next of kin. That's the husband. He won't get permission. Let's go to the district attorney's office. We went to the DA's office. We showed them the circumstantial evidence. They said, wow, we are going to exhume the body. We'll make an application. That application was granted. They exhumed it. It came back homicide by neck compression. Took 10 years to get him indicted and convicted. I won't bore you with the details, but it was
10 years. Oh
Renee.
my God.
He was ultimately convicted of murder. That was an incredible journey, and the district attorney, hats off to him because he did an amazing job. The other case that I was talking about, apropos to 9/11, just 2 days ago, I had a client and he was getting a divorce, and he had a prenuptial agreement that had been signed by him and his wife, except he didn't have a copy of it. And the lawyer who prepared it died. And the wife said, I don't remember any prenuptial agreement. And there was another document where his father had gifted him seats on the Mercantile Exchange in New York. So we are now preparing for trial, and he and I are in the office, and he said, Marilyn, she waived all of her claims to these seats. These seats are millions of dollars. So I said to him, wait a minute. I just watched this SUV show. They have these forensic guide. And he actually got called by Chase Bank after 9/11. We have your safety deposit box if you want to come get it. It's melted shut, but if you want it, you can have it. And he took it. And he had it in his office for years. And he said to me, I have the box. So we went ahead and we hired a forensic expert. And he told us, look, I can open the box. You're going to have to videotape it and photograph it very quickly. If there's anything there, we'll see it, but the ink will evaporate very quickly once it hits the air. So we got a court order allowing us to videotape and to be able to use the videotape and the photographs. And the husband, myself, the husband, the wife, and her attorney met at the lab. The technician opened up the box and literally took a shovel. Even though everything was burnt, the ashes were in place, and shoveled out what was clearly the prenup. We got the first page and we got the signature page. And then they videotaped it, they photographed it, and then the ink just kind of faded. I was so worried that the wife's attorney was going to breathe over and there was a big pie, breathe, and then the ashes are going to go all over the place. We didn't go to trial. We settled the case. And, it was such an interesting, fascinating, but it was a determination lesson.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do whatever we have to do. We got to try.
Right.
And that's what we did. So, those are just two, I think, unusual cases. I've had in 41 years very fascinating, interesting cases, international cases, kidnapping cases. Got the kids back twice, one from Italy, one from Pakistan. So it's a wonderfully colorful and interesting practice.
Well, could sit here and listen to your stories for quite some time, because clearly you've had a remarkable career and helped so many people. But we are reaching the end of our show. But before we go, Marilyn, if you could impart on our listeners what you've learned about women and their resilience throughout your career and experience.
Well, I have great admiration for women, and I always think it is our responsibility to help women go forward in being a productive human being. And I look at my own kids. I have a daughter who's now a lawyer. I, there's no magic sauce, right? The only thing that you can say to someone is you got to work really hard. And no one's going to drop the fairy dust on you and say, wow, you're a princess now. You got to go out there and you've got to work hard and don't stop. And the word no shouldn't be in your vocabulary. It should be, okay, well, maybe not now, but it doesn't mean never. And find another way to advance and to go forward. I'm not a big supporter of women who give up. I'm not a big supporter of, poor me mentality. That's not I'm not unsympathetic. Everybody has their moment where they're entitled to really be pained. But
Mhm.
I'm going to give you a short pass on that. And that is because women are so capable of doing so much and they're
Right.
incredibly talented. And you just have to tap into those talents. You don't have to be a lawyer or a doctor. You can discover painting. You can discover that you are able to do so many fascinating things. You can help other people. So when I say I don't have patience, it's because I know that you are so capable. I want to see you
Right.
really expand yourself and do great things. I had a woman many, many years ago. I represented, and I'll close on this. I represented her husband. She was Hungarian, extraordinarily beautiful. And he was a misogynist, I have to say. And I was tough in that case. And the case ended. And one day my secretary came to me and she said, "This woman is outside. Here's her name." And I said, "Well, I don't want to see her. That's the husband's ex-wife." She thought you would say that. She asked if she can speak with you. She wanted to tell you something. So I went out, I brought her into my office. She said to me, "Even though you were so rough, you were aggressive against me, I so admired you. I saw a beautiful woman who was determined, hardworking, and I wanted to be like you." So I went to paralegal school and I'm now a paralegal. And we ended up becoming friends over time.
Wow.
And I thought that that was such he put her down. She was useless. She was this, she was that. She didn't contribute to his business. Um, I thought that was such an incredible story. And I so appreciated it, resonated with me
Right.
that you can have an impact on people that you don't even realize that you're having. And that goes to the fact that women are capable of everything good. I'll end on that note.
Well, thank you so much, Marilyn. It's been such a joy to have you, and we've learned a lot. Where can our listeners find you for more information and resources?
So I am a partner at Blank Rome. My address is on the website, and I'm in the New York office.
Wonderful. Well, we've reached the end of our show today. Thank you so much, Marilyn
Thank you.
Chinitz, for joining us. It's been great. And we really enjoyed discussing protecting your assets, receiving alimony, and so much more. For listeners, if you or someone you know is going through divorce or is thinking about a divorce in the Northeast Florida area, please reach out to us at floridawomensLawGroup.com. You'll find our practice areas and a link to our website in the show notes, as well as our guest links as well. Thank you for listening.